When a courtroom cheers, "Justice served," it's often a lie, because sometimes the loudest voice in the room is hiding the darkest truth. If you're ready for a ride through betrayal, corruption, power, and one man's fight for justice, keep reading this explosive story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about the system. And hey, if you love powerful stories that uncover secrets and twist reality upside down, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because more mind-bending tales are on the way. The courtroom was packed that morning, the tension so thick that even the polished oak walls seemed to sweat with it, and when the judge finally leaned forward with that smug half-smile plastered across his face, the air cracked open with the kind of silence that makes your stomach twist before the explosion comes, and then it did. "Not guilty," he declared to the row of uniformed officers accused of planting evidence, running an extortion ring, and even framing innocent men for crimes they never committed, and the words rolled off his tongue as if he were announcing the weather, cold, casual, final, and the gallery erupted, some in shock, some in outrage, but most in disbelief because the evidence had been overwhelming. Tapes, recordings, eyewitnesses, yet here were the so-called guardians of law walking free, saluting like heroes while the real victims sat in chains, and the judge's gavel hammered not justice but corruption deeper into the ground, and that was the exact moment when Charles D. Hawkins, a sharp-dressed black lawyer with fire in his eyes and scars in his heart, rose slowly from his seat like a storm preparing to break, his calm deliberate, his movements like a blade sharpening itself, and the murmurs rippled through the room because everyone knew Hawkins wasn't supposed to speak anymore. The trial was over, the verdict sealed, but rules never stopped a man who had already buried his faith in the system, and when he spoke, his voice carried not just to the people in the room but to the ghosts of every wrong verdict, every mother who cried for a son swallowed by lies, every soul shackled by injustice. "Your Honor, I move to present new evidence," he said, and the judge scoffed, shaking his head. "This case is closed, counselor. Sit down before I hold you in contempt." But Hawkins didn't flinch, he only raised his hand holding a slim black folder, and then a second one, and finally he dropped a flash drive onto the prosecution table with a thud that made the clerk gasp. "Closed. Maybe for you, Judge Reynolds, but not for the people you sold out, not for the law you pretend to serve," and whispers exploded like gunfire in the gallery, the cops shifting uncomfortably because they had expected immunity, not exposure, and Hawkins didn't stop, his words pouring like acid. "I have here a set of wire transfers, concealed documents, recorded calls, and even private emails, all pointing to a network of payments flowing directly to your chambers from the very officers you just acquitted, and I swear on every oath I've ever taken, I will burn this system down before I let this go." The judge's face, once smug, drained of color, but he slammed his gavel. "Bailiff, remove this man," and the officer hesitated, because now eyes were on him too, and Hawkins, sensing hesitation, pressed forward. "What's the price of justice these days, Reynolds? $5,000 a week, 10, or was it the vacation home in Palm Springs, courtesy of Sergeant Kowalski here?" And at that, gasps filled the room, heads turned, the dirty cop's face blotched red, his mouth opening but no words coming, because everyone knew Hawkins was telling the truth, and it was only the beginning. Hawkins was not a man driven by career ambition or wealth. He had walked away from lucrative firms and polite boardrooms because something in him had broken years ago when his older brother Jerome had been sentenced to 30 years on a trumped-up drug charge, evidence planted by the very precinct now on trial, and Jerome had died inside before parole could ever be considered, and Hawkins had carved that grief into a weapon, swearing he'd tear down the machine that devoured men like Jerome, and in this moment he was wielding that weapon openly, the courtroom his battlefield, the judge his target, and corruption the enemy no longer hidden but naked under the bright fluorescent lights. "Mr. Hawkins," the judge stammered, his voice shaking now, "these allegations are outrageous," but the lawyer's lips curled into a thin smile. "Allegations? Then why don't we let the people hear the recordings?" And before anyone could stop him he pulled a small speaker from his bag, hit play, and the sound of the judge's voice filled the courtroom. "Yeah, don't worry, Kowalski, I'll take care of it. Same deal as last time, I'll dismiss the evidence but make sure the envelope gets delivered by Friday." The gallery went wild, reporters scribbling furiously, phones raised, streaming live, and the bailiff, caught between loyalty and survival, froze, the gavel slamming over and over as Reynolds screamed, "Turn that off. Turn it off." But it was too late, the truth had already left the room, flying into every corner of the city. Yet Hawkins knew this was only round one, because corrupt men do not fall quietly, they drag everyone with them, and as the chaos unfolded, he could see Kowalski whispering to the other officers, signaling, planning, and Hawkins remembered the threats, the late-night calls, the shadow cars parked outside his apartment, and he understood this fight was no longer about one verdict but about survival, his and the community's, because men like Reynolds and his cops had roots deep into city politics, unions, and even organized crime, and cutting them out would mean war. But Hawkins thrived in war, his mind sharp with strategy, his soul unwilling to yield, and as marshals finally intervened, dragging Reynolds away in a humiliating display, Hawkins gathered his evidence and walked into the blaze of cameras outside, his words crisp. The system didn't fail today, it got caught. But this is only the beginning. Justice is not a verdict, it's a fight. The crowd roared, some weeping, some chanting his name, and yet Hawkins knew danger lurked behind the applause, because exposing one man only made the others more desperate, and the next days would bring attempts to silence him, bribes, threats, maybe worse. But what no one realized was that Hawkins had anticipated every move, and the deeper he had dug, the more he had uncovered, layers of corruption stacked like rotten bricks, from the DA's office to city council members, to even state officials, and with every twist, the question wasn't if he could bring them down, but if he could survive long enough to do it. Night after night, files piled on his desk, each one a potential bomb, and when his office was broken into, nothing stolen except a single folder marked Reynolds. Phase 2. He understood the message. They were watching, they were scared, but they were still powerful, and Hawkins whispered to the empty room, "Good. Be scared, because I'm just getting started." And the twists came fast. An ally turned traitor, a witness kidnapped, a news anchor suddenly silenced after promising to air the recordings, and then the shocker. One of Hawkins's own clients, a man he had defended pro bono years ago, now resurfacing as a paid informant working for the dirty cops, testifying falsely that Hawkins had fabricated the evidence, and for a moment it looked like the hunter had become the hunted, with warrants circling his name, his bar license on the line, and his enemies celebrating, but Hawkins had kept the ace hidden, recordings not just of Reynolds but of the men behind him, the faceless donors, the businessmen laundering money through police unions, the politicians handing favors in exchange for silence. And when he dropped those files into the hands of an independent journalist known for never bowing to pressure, the story exploded beyond control, national headlines screaming corruption at the highest levels, FBI raids hitting city offices, Reynolds found dead under suspicious suicide circumstances, and yet Hawkins did not celebrate, because victory came laced with blood, allies lost, enemies still circling, and justice always feeling one step further away. But the people remembered. The city shifted, and Hawkins, standing under the harsh glow of a single streetlight, understood the war wasn't over, but the tide had turned, and in the whispers of the crowd, in the chants outside the courthouse, in the trembling fear of those who once believed themselves untouchable, justice, real justice, had finally found its voice, and it spoke through him.